And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this news conference held by the Hawaii State Teachers Association, responding to the announcement of thresholds for schools to reopen or close because of COVID-19. We have here with you today Corey Rosenlee, who is the president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. We have reporters on with us as well in a Zoom that we are streaming live. Corey's going to give some introductory remarks and then take questions from reporters. And this is being streamed live both on HSTA's YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page, and will be available afterwards and shareable. So without further ado, Corey.
Aloha, I'm Corey Rosenlee, president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. First thing is, I am just shocked, looking at these metrics. These metrics are so far out of what is happening in the rest of this country that it's going to not only put our teachers and our students, but the entire community at risk. This is dangerous. Today, when they're talking, and I heard the acting epidemiologist say, we expect an increase of cases at our schools. Those are not just numbers. Those are our keiki. Those are our teachers. Just this week, we had a staff member pass away due to the coronavirus. And that's the last thing we want for any of our schools. The standards here also look like they were thrown together without any conversations with those that are actually in the classrooms. The union was not consulted, and therefore when we're looking at these numbers, we can realize quickly some of the mistakes that they're making and some of the things that are just not going to work. We've already seen, just since the end of June, that we've already had 89 cases in our schools already. And that's with very few students on campuses. But if we were to try to bring 180,000 students back to campus, what this is trying to suggest, there's gonna be just a tremendous amount of cases that's gonna put everyone in jeopardy. The union was not consulted, and I will tell you this is something that we're going to fight. We're gonna ask the Board of Education to step in to make sure that we go for distance learning until at least the beginning of the second semester. Then that should be for all students across the state. So with that, I will take some questions.
So reporters, go ahead and write your name into the chat if you have a question, and then we'll ask you to unmute your mic and ask away. Okay, first we have a question from Suvan Lee at Honolulu Civil Beat. Hi, Suvan.
Okie and Corey. So if HSTA was given a seat at the table to discuss these metrics, what would you have suggested would have been an appropriate or threshold number of cases per, these specific parameters to bring students back to campus? Do you have any suggestions or ideas as far as what your advice would have been?
The one thing we've learned throughout this entire coronavirus pandemic is that we have to listen to the science. And that in following the science and looking at the research, that's going to help us. So right now, the question is for the entire country is, can we open our schools safely? And right now, every major school district is either closed and doing distance learning, or the ones that have tried to open have had just, huge amount of cases that have occurred and had to close. Right now, just today, New York, with less than a 1% positivity rate, decided to go to distance learning because they know that if they were to try to open up their schools, there would be an explosion of cases. So what we have to look at is the data. And in this case, has a school system similar to Hawaii been able to open up for in-person learning and be able to do that without an explosion of cases? And right now the answer is no. So that's what we have to look at. We have to look at the research. And if they're able to open up effectively, great, then we have a model. But right now, the model has told us that it is dangerous to open up to in-person learning.
Thank you, Suvan. Next, Ashley Mizuo from Hawaii Public Radio.
Can you talk about some of the things that you guys have been seeing, whether or not you have confidence in whether DOE can, supply PPE equipment and things like that? And I noticed also in the threshold or in the guidance, they're talking a lot about the need for barriers, like physical barriers. And is there any, even anecdotally, how much teachers are spending on their own equipment versus what's being supplied to them?
So thank you for the question, Ashley. And there's two parts of what they've come out with. One are the metrics of the numbers per 10,000. And the second thing are these checklists. We have absolutely no confidence that they're going to follow these checklists, because what we've heard across the state is with just, some students on campuses that this is not being followed. Our teachers have shared that they're getting very little PPE gear. They're sharing with us that the common areas are not being cleaned. And even right now, they're saying it's not safe. So I think what we're concerned about is that the checklists are going to be completely ignored, and they're just going to look at the metrics. Excuse me.
Bless you, Corey. Okay, next we have Mahia Lenny Richardson from Hawaii News Now. Mahia.
Aloha. The superintendent mentioned decisions made at the complex area, and that this is not a one-size-fits-all plan. Is that acceptable to you, or do you want more of a blanket reopening?
So we've already seen, when it comes to telework, that some complex area superintendents have uniformly denied teachers the ability to work from home even when they can. And so it should not be at the whim of one person without any accountability. And in Oahu, where you have multiple complex areas, it's like having a peeing section of the pool. It has to be something that's uniform, and it cannot just be kicked down to the whims of one person in one area. And so we believe it should be a statewide policy.
Okay, and next from Susan Asoyan at the Honolulu Star Advertiser. Susan.
Corey, you mentioned that other districts haven't been able to open. They did say in presenting the guidance that they looked at other states and took that into account, that these numbers weren't just pulled out of thin air. You probably haven't really had a chance to dive into it, but do you have any response to that? Can we?
Oh, absolutely.
They didn't just, yeah. What? Thanks.
So I would love them to cite the example of those metrics being used at a major school district where it was effective. I think that is a question that deserves to be answered. What is the background for those numbers to show that the research is effective? And if they cannot do that, then they should not be using those metrics. There is no major school district that has been able to open effectively in the entire country. Most have not even tried to go to something like this. That's why we think it's so risky. And I did not have a great chance to look at it, but I did skim through that. I want to see where they're citing that this has been done effectively. And I think I would ask the media to check that source as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Next, Vicky Viotti, Susan's colleague from the Star Advertiser.
Hi, folks. I wanted to ask a little something about the in-person learning that is going on. Are you satisfied with the way schools are set up to accommodate students who, because of need, are compelled to learn on campus? How is that going?
So the first problem is the Department of Education has still not been transparent about where there are cases. And one of the questions we've been asking is how many students are on each campus and how many cases have been on those campuses? And is there a relationship? And as long as they're not being transparent, how do we know which areas are safe or not safe? And what we've heard from teachers, our teachers have reported from across the state that they do not feel safe. Even in special education classrooms, you may have 10 to 20 people in a small area. And the teachers have reported that they just feel this is unsafe. And when it comes to these learning labs, teachers have been reporting that these are growing bigger and bigger as parents are learning that they can just drop off their kids and it's not safe. And so there has been no accounting to seeing what happens at these schools and whether this is leading to an increase of cases.
Thanks.
Thank you, Vicki. And next, follow up, another question from Ashley Mizuo, Hawaii Public Radio.
Thanks. So theoretically, what does HSTA, how long does HSTA want the state to stay at full distance learning? Are we just kind of, would you guys be more willing once we see another state or another city open up their schools successfully? We just don't want to be the guinea pig is kind of what I'm hearing.
So two parts to that question, Ashley. The first one is, right now, let's take it quarter by quarter. And this is the problem that their plan has. They're suggesting every 14 days we oscillate between, in-person, blended, and that is already driving our teachers and our students nuts. They want consistency. Our teachers right now are in the mode of distance learning. They're getting used to it, and having to jump back and forth is just making everyone really stressed. There was a situation just last week, where unfortunately our best wishes and our hearts go out to the family of a Noelani teacher. She didn't actually die of coronavirus, but the family said she died of the stress due to coronavirus. And our teachers are stressed right now, and they can't be going back and forth. And to your second point, yes, our keiki and our teachers are not guinea pigs. When we talk about these cases, these have real world impacts, and therefore it should be based on the research and the data. And so some schools have decided that they were going to try to open, places like Georgia and Florida and Alabama. And quickly what happened is there was this explosion of cases and they had to shut down. So we don't have to be the guinea pigs. There have been other guinea pigs and they've showed us what has happened. And we have to come to the realization that our desire for our kids to be in the schools does not stop that this pandemic and this virus can spread. And I want to point out the other example, looking at what's happened at colleges across the country are shutting down because they too have tried to open and they've had disastrous results.
Next, another question from Suvan Lee at Civil Beat.
Hi. Corey, in today's DOH guidance, there is a section that says schools should bring students back to campus if and only if, there's a 50% capacity, or I'm sorry, if there's sufficient staffing at that school. What would HSTA find satisfactory as far as measuring or recording or keeping track of that 50% capacity threshold that the DOH recommends? Who should be responsible for keeping track and logging and enforcing that rule?
So, Suvan, if I can unpack that statistic for one moment. The first one is talking about in-person learning and also asking for 6 feet. That cannot be done in the vast majority of all of our public schools. In fact, a lot of the larger schools have to go to a B, C, D schedule where only about 25% of students are on campus in order to maintain 6 feet. So really, the in-person is just allowing schools, that private schools, that have very low class sizes to be able to do it. And when they talk about even blended learning at 50%, again, a lot of our schools can't even do that. So, there's this concern about whether this blended learning is actually better for our students. And our teachers are saying it actually isn't. Because right now, my daughter is going to all of her classes every single day. And if we go to a blended model, she may only go to class 1 out of every 4 days. So I think as a parent that currently doing distance learning actually is better because she can go to class every single day and she doesn't have to wear a mask all day. And she's not putting herself in harm's way.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Go ahead, Suvan.
Okay, so as we know, the Board of Education is meeting later this afternoon, and in the testimony submitted ahead of time, there were quite a few parents who expressed their concern about their student or their kids who are distance learning and just completely struggling with it. What is HSTA's response to those families who are simply kind of, at their wits' end over this distance learning model because their children are not engaging with it?
So first, I empathize with any parent. This is not the situation we would want. And I think that for any parent, the first priority is, of course, they want their kids in school. But those same parents, if there was a situation where their child got sick, or for a lot of our homes, we have multi-generational homes where the child may not develop symptoms, but they could bring that coronavirus home. And Suvan, that's why one of the things that's so important to be able to identify is, when we open up our schools and they're having cases, in those areas, are there an increased amount of cases? And I'll give you this example. So the example was made about, opening up Molokai and Hana, and they felt like that was a safe place to do it. And what we've seen in there is, I believe there's 1 or 2 cases already at our schools in Molokai. And you've also seen more cases there, I think 11 cases. And so the second we open up our schools, there's been, an increase for the schools and the community. And what they've shared with me, the teachers in Molokai, is they don't have the capacity if there is a pandemic. And so our schools are just one part of our community. So I know those parents want their kids in class, but sometimes we have to act not just on the individual needs, but our collective needs together. And right now, the best thing for all of us in the state, and we've seen, cases increase in Hawaii today, is that we have to have a community effort to do the best that we can to make sure that we can eradicate this virus.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from reporters? If not, Corey, do you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you. And I know that there's a lot of anxiety among our members out there too. I will say that there is a Board of Education meeting coming up just at 2:15 this afternoon. And we will be asking the Board of Education to get involved in this matter so that our schools do not open up to these standards and we do not put everyone in jeopardy. So we will be testifying at the Board of Education as well.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a safe afternoon. And remember that this news conference is going to be archived on HSTA's Facebook page as well as the YouTube channel. Aloha.